Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bricks, Bucks, and Bytes podcast, your weekly dive into funding, market, and investor news in architecture, engineering, construction, and supply chain. Before we get started though, if you're a startup founder or operator responsible for innovation in your company, or you want a deeper, more insightful look into technology in AEC, you won't want to miss our newsletter. From deep dives into particular technologies such as AI, robotics, design, software, and so on. Hot takes from investors betting big in AEC technology and advice on building tech companies, including the stories and takeaways of the most successful AEC technology founders. Head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today to get this exclusive material straight to your inbox. And now for the episode. Good morning, guys. Are you? Have you both done your Christmas decorations yet?
I'm not, but I know that you are.
I married someone for that job.
That's a great answer. I married someone as well. I need to ask her if she done this faculty. That's cool.
Yeah. No, my wife is crazy about it. So yeah, we're in full on holiday decoration here at home, Hellerman.
Nice. Yeah, same. We have our tree up as of last week and decorations. And we blame it on the kids, but truthfully, it's us that are most excited, as you do as a parent. So anyway, guys, so today we will be recording. We will be discussing, the company here on the screen is Telio, but we're actually going to be discussing more about the space that those guys operate in. So as far as I'm aware, this is about fitting heavy machinery and equipment so they can be operated remotely and autonomously. And then we'll also look at, last week we discussed a little bit about IPOs and in particular ServiceTitan. So we'll be touching on some of the mechanics behind that. And then we will end on thesis building and perhaps a little bit about Europe as well. So, Martin.
Okay, well, so I will read it a bit and see where it goes. So Telio describes itself as a construction robotics startup, but its mission is bigger than automating heavy equipment like excavators and tractors. Today, Telio's retrofitted machinery allows its customer to operate their existing fleets simultaneously. Semi-autonomously, sorry. In the future, the startup sees the data it collects as a key enabler for the robotics industry to reach its ChatGPT moment.
I love how this has become a verb now. ChatGPT moment.
So it's interesting. So you get you take the existing excavator or yellow machine type of and you retrofit it. You add some tech, and it becomes intelligent enough so someone can operate it from remote location. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And there's like two competing models in this space, right? So there's the believers in full autonomy, so no driver/operator at all. And then there's the believers in teleoperation or remote operation, which, to be fair, many of them believe that unlocks the full autonomy at a later stage, because there's a way to then actually see how an operator processes, for example, an excavator or any other kind of yellow machine, and in observing that, then basically replicating the process of how to make it more autonomous, which, to be fair, is exactly how, for example, ChatGPT learned coding, right? So ChatGPT still the fundamental way how, through the partnership with GitHub, it actually learned to code most of the languages is by observing how engineers were to write code, not necessarily understand the code itself. And so this one here could be an intermediate step to something similar, which is what Telio seems to believe. So there's two schools of thought, and then there's a third school of thought which thinks that all of this doesn't make a lot of sense. So depending on which camp you land in, you like one solution or the other.
What's interesting to me is it easier to innovate like from outside, like them, in a sense that there is an existing yellow machine, and then obviously different manufacturers have different systems, I guess, and you just come in and you install your kit and it works, rather than innovating from within a producer, manufacturer. it's obviously if they succeed, seems like this is better solution because they can adjust the technology to any yellow machine possibly there. Now, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so there are hundreds of thousands of yellow machines already in the market that have no way to be teleoperated or autonomous because they were bought 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Some are 50 years old. I recently had to do a bit with the landscaping market, and in landscaping you find yellow machines that are relatively old. So none of them would be sold net new with already existing technology. And yet you have this installed base of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of yellow machines across the world. And that's an interesting demand base for companies like Telio or the full autonomy companies. Because the OEMs, they won't target that market initially. They will target only with technology, the new yellow machines that they want to sell. So there's a bit of that market inefficiency time window where you can attack the installed base and sell your technology into retrofitting, which is what Telio also does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So semi-autonomously. So just scroll up a little bit, man. Well, from what confused me a little bit in this article, go right to the top. You have a picture of a guy who is remote operating. Oh yeah, that is a machine. It actually looks like a game or something. Then in my head, I was thinking, well, what's the benefit of remote operation? But actually what they're saying here is, there is obviously benefits to remote operation, which we don't have to get into, but it's the semi-autonomous part, right? So does anyone here know what the type of construction work they will actually be autonomizing?
I can chip in here because I remember there was this clip a few years ago, perhaps from one of the mines in China, where half of the mine literally collapsed and taking probably hundreds of vehicles and machines and people within them as well. As you could see on the footage, they were just driving and suddenly like half of this mine collapsed completely. So that would be perfect use case for this type of mining activity, feels to me. So everything which is super risky for a human to be in, that would do well, Phil.
Yeah, and so it would increase the efficiency of the companies that operate these machines as well. Because
that's one of the promises that solution providers like this would sell you. Hey, I can reduce, for example, your fuel costs by increasing the fuel efficiency. Something that, for example, you can see when you have an excavator and the way that you actually direct the bucket, you can actually achieve relatively meaningful fuel savings with lesser motion, more optimized motion, etc. And the same could be said about moving the vehicle around. Most markets, take the mining market for a minute, where you have these mega yellow machines moving dirt around or moving, rocks around and metals. Most of these mega mines will be very remote. And it's more of an oil and gas problem than a construction problem there, because the operators that drive these machines will earn 250,000 or more a year in order to spend, substantial parts of their life out in the wild, in the remote, away from families, away from infrastructure, civilization, etc. So there's a big labor cost saving that for some of these markets that you sell yellow machines into, like mining, that you can actually do. The second one to consider, and that's what a bull for teleoperation would say, oftentimes, mining is an exception, because in mining, oftentimes you would try to have the truck running at 100% uptime with the driver. But in construction sites, very, very rarely does a yellow machine on a, let's say, 8-hour workday actually run for 8 hours. Which means that if you have an operator, the operator very rarely will actually fill their workday with operating the machine. There are days like that. For example, if you do deconstruction, tearing stuff down, you could reach 100% utilization of a operator per yellow machine. But most of the operations that you use yellow machines for on construction sites will not require you to have 100% uptime. It will not be possible due to scheduling, etc. In a teleoperation situation, you can actually have the same operator operate 2, 3, or 4 different yellow machines on 2, 3, or 4 different work sites. And that's eliminating downtime for the operator and logistics or travel time for the operator. So there's a very interesting thesis for the bulls of teleoperation here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting space, I think, actually.
Yeah. Is it, maybe why is it a venture backable market, and perhaps why not? Hey listeners, I want to take a quick break to remind you about the Bricks and Bytes newsletter. If you're interested in learning about the technology shaping the future of construction, you won't want to miss the valuable insights we share each week. To get this exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox, head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today. Link is in the show notes. Back to the show.
Okay, let's explore that maybe first.
Okay, yeah, I can do a quick one. It becomes a venture backable market if you believe as a bull in either of these models that the installed base of existing machines is not safeguarded by the OEMs. You can go straight to the customer. You can actually bypass the OEMs, and then you can sell relatively high ACV, average contract value subscriptions to the operators of the site, of the yellow machines, etc. In my opinion, it's very hard to make a venture case for the amount of money that you have to pour into these kinds of companies when it's not a subscription model in this specific case. So if you want to sell the hardware, if you want to lease the hardware, it becomes, for most of these markets so far, a very capital inefficient journey to do that. I think the bulls will believe in the subscription model and bypassing the OEMs in the early years. And we're still in the early years, even maybe after 7 or 8 years into this market. The bear, on the other hand, might have opinions that, hey, the OEMs will offer competing solutions for the retrofit market, maybe not as quickly, but the growth in this market isn't so quick that you can bypass them. That's what a bear might think. And the other thing that the bear might think is that actually, hey, the ACV for subscriptions is not going to be that high. There's going to be substitutes. There's going to be purchasing optionality for the operators of these sites. And therefore, actually, there will be price compression on the subscriptions, or maybe actually they will all get consolidated in hardware/IoT/software companies like Trimble or like Hexagon, which in the end are more comfortable also with a hardware sale model that is then added with a service component. And the operators of sites might be more comfortable with that. It might also then reduce the prices even further. That's what the bear might think. And by the way, on that note, Hexagon in November actually announced the purchasing of a company in the space, roughly in this space, which is a technology provider for added autonomy sensors for yellow machines. So we see these moves happening.
It's interesting. Yeah. So if we think about it, like trying to drive some analogies, as I'm trying to figure it out. For example, I'm just very curious why the OEMs, you call them, why they don't have a lead in innovating in this space. For example, I don't know if this is the right example or not, but let's see. So Tesla, okay, it's a car manufacturer, and they are going into this electric vehicles, and they are holding a lead there. I just struggle to find out a startup which works only on the electric, a kit for vehicles to be then connected to the vehicle so that it can be electric. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So feels to me that it's very difficult to imagine for me to a startup to like growing quite rapidly and well into the space if it does not come from the manufacturer.
Yeah, I suppose you could say that it's harder and slower for the big OEMs to create a solution like this than to just buy a startup perhaps when it realizes its product can do what they want it to do. So it's a decision of develop in-house or find an external solution, perhaps.
There's a relatively simplistic way to think about it, but oftentimes it works in markets like this. You can ask yourself the question, hey, do I believe that the distribution of startups will grow quicker than the product development of the incumbent? So will the steepness of my distribution curve as a startup exceed the steepness of the product development rate of the incumbent? In mining, at least, so far, I would say we haven't seen that. And that might have to do with the fact that mining operations is a near 100% uptime operation, and the cost of downtime is exceptionally high. That makes mining a track record problem. And it makes a change of infrastructure relatively costly, because you literally have to wind down the mine. You have a risk of errors happening during the switch over into the new setup, which would be, for example, an autonomous or a teleoperated setup. If that then prolongs, there's even more millions on the line of switching the site over. And operators in that market will typically be, due to that fact, more risk averse of trying totally radical, unproven stuff. And that in itself gives sometimes an added track record benefit to whoever already serves that mine. That will delay adoption. That will give more time to the OEMs to figure out solutions, etc. So that's exactly the function that I'm describing here. On construction sites, the problem is different. It's not as pronounced as in mining, because you have new construction sites going online every day. So literally, you can actually do the switch over into a new construction site before the site starts. So that's a little bit better than a continuous operation like mining. Nevertheless, on the other hand, screwing things up on a construction site once it is up and running, we all know that is like, that's disastrous potentially. That's very costly, can delay other things, it can create quality problems. Nobody wants that. That's where a teleoperation like Telio has a little bit of a benefit, in my opinion, over a full autonomy offering, because it's a little bit more believable for the operator of such a site that, hey, I'm just putting the person that used to sit in the driver's seat in a seat in your container. It's not technically your container, but like, that's the image that you can use to sell it. And, the steer is now just basically electronic instead of mechanical. It wasn't mechanical for a long time, but just like, that's the image that you are using. And I think just coming on board with that kind of relatively simple change in the setup is a little bit easier to sell. So that's where the function of, hey, can I actually out-distribute the product innovation rate of the OEMs, perhaps is more tilted in the favor of startups. But you're right to ask this, Martin. And generally, when the adoption rate is slow, it favors the OEM to catch up on product development.
What is also interesting is when you think about it, from now till fully autonomous yellow machines, it's like, what's the speed at which it will be growing? The space will be growing towards fully autonomous. And if there is enough space for this teleoperating, in the meantime, to develop enough before the tech catches well enough for it to be fully automated.
So the bulls in this market will tell you, Martin, it's only 1 year away. You only have to believe it in 1 year. I mean, they've been saying that for 10 years, by the way. It's only 1 year away. The bears
story.
Exactly. The bears, on the other hand, might point out that it might be more realistic to differentiate by controlled environments versus uncontrolled environments. We have seen robotics in automotive factories in the late 80s flourish and come to, both in Japan and in Germany, come to a great, and Korea for that matter, actually, to a big rollout rate. And that's because it's a very controlled environment. The process is completely controlled. There's no obstacles that I have to consider. I can design the entire environment to the fact that a robot can do 1, 2, 3, 10 different things, but not anything more. And it doesn't have to navigate its environment. So when it comes to autonomy versus teleoperation in yellow machines, the bear would point out that, hey, it's more likely to happen in controlled environments at a faster adoption clip than it is in uncontrolled. Controlled is a mine. because they are literally, the paths are carved, the routes are clear, the pickup points, or the loading points and the unloading points, they are defined for most of the time. Sometimes they do change, but then you can retrain it relatively simply and you don't expect any obstacles in between. On a construction site, it literally changes every day. There will be obstacles that make you move around. On a let's say high-rise project, for example, that makes an uncontrolled environment on a construction site, and that makes it not necessarily ideal for the fastest adoption of, for example, an autonomy solution. Now, there are in-betweens, for example, like solar farms. So solar farms, if you develop them, you do have a project, not a continuous operation like a mine, but the project is actually relatively well controlled. It's flat land. There's going to be space to develop it. You have a very clear, repeatable layout that you need to go through. So there, I think that's the hybrid solution where you get like a project nature, but with more of a controlled environment. The bear would say, hey, I expect these kinds of solutions to flourish in controlled environments, and I would expect it to take a long time in uncontrolled ones.
Oh, and are you a bear or bull in this case? Of course, I know you're bull in general.
I don't know. I feel like I know enough necessarily about the space to have drawn a concrete thesis, balancing the arguments either way. But I do have a question related to
very British answer, by the way.
It's a political answer. If you want me to give an answer just for the sake of an answer, I'll say I am a bear.
Okay.
This is a follow-on round. We don't necessarily have to relate this to Telio, but just in print general, Patrick, what can we read? It's a pretty generic and broad question, but as an investor, if you see a company that's raised a follow-on round, scroll up mine. I can't remember the exact wording on this article. It says
it's an two extended rounds.
Yeah, 2 extended rounds. You're obviously going to read into that somewhat. What does it mean typically if people are raising follow-on rounds? Is it a positive sign, negative sign?
Yeah, so just on the terminology, so a follow-on round can be any kind of capital that follows on. It could be at an up round, a down round. It could be a sidestep. It could be from internals, externals. Follow-on just describes, hey, there's new capital coming in. This one is a bit more specific terminology, so it speaks of extensions. Extensions are typically rounds that happen at the same or near the same valuation as the previous round. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes extensions would be smaller than the original round that they extend. Disclaimer, and I want everyone to actually internalize this in the venture landscape, never attach any signals to fundraisings, neither good ones nor bad ones. So in extension, some people might say it's negative. A huge 180 million round, people will think it's positive. It's not a signal. You cannot use it to judge the quality of a company. Just get that in your mind. Now, with that disclaimer out of the way, extensions, when they happen in difficult market environments, it's oftentimes a neutral to slightly negative circumstance where the company needs capital, but it hasn't matured enough to actually justify the previous valuation, or has outgrown has outgrown the previous valuation. But at the same time, it can still convince new capital givers to keep giving the company a little bit more runway to see if it can flourish into outgrowing its previous valuation. That is in, let's say, neutral or negative market context. In very positive market context, an extension round would be a negative signal for most people. Again, don't attach a signal to it. It's just what most people would think it is. And that is because in a positive market environment, oftentimes, as we've seen in 2019, 2020, 2021, even poor companies, poorly operated companies can raise big up rounds, right? And so then an extension would oftentimes be seen by outside observers as, what's going on here? That's not a good signal. And they shouldn't attach any signal to it at all, to be clear. So here, 2 extensions in a very, in a business like this, which has a bit of a hardware component, a lot of software to develop, it's relatively difficult to distribute and to get it up and running. It probably means that there's more product development that has to be ongoing, but also that there are investors who believe that the product, once it has matured, still has the potential that they believed from the original round. It might be that the original round in 2022 perhaps was a bit too highly valued. That's speculation, but it would fit the market context at the time. And then that's something that might have happened here. Overall, I think it's a neutral signal. The company still raised money and keeps going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. I would just add that I spoke with Ken from Dig Robotics a few weeks ago, and I know Gabe recorded a podcast with him on Bit Builders, I think on Wednesday.
Yeah.
So seems like it is a similar, well, not similar, but similar solution. So I think it will be interesting to tune in and see what these guys do in this space.
It's funny that looking at their Telio as a company, an investor, their cap table or the investors there have invested in them, there's not any, from what I can see, sector specific, apart from if you're looking at it from a transportation perspective, or what does this one say? Companies that are transforming the moving world. Any thoughts on this? Why they haven't gone for construction AEC sector specific fund?
No thoughts. I think K9 might actually have a bit of an exposure to construction, and trucks, like you said, is a logistics and mobility investor. No, I don't know. You'd have to interview the fund.
Sure.
Okay, shall we move on?
Okay. Here is why ServiceTitan was on the clock to go public.
So it's always going to happen. That's what I can read from that title.
Always tomorrow.
Yeah, so I think we have quite a lot of complicated VC jargon and all of the complex stuff. So where should we start with that one? Maybe, Patrick, what is ServiceTitan, and is it going public?
Yeah, so ServiceTitan is located in the space of tradespeople and small contractor software. Think HVAC, tradespeople, can be roofers, landscapers, other blue-collar jobs. And so ServiceTitan within that space offers a modular suite of software with which you can run your entire business operation or just a part of it. So part of the beauty of ServiceTitan is that it's not a monolithic type of software that lets you do, let's say, only one process, or that you need to buy everything from. You can actually, with ServiceTitan, pick specific workflows of your business, say the quote to cash workflow, for example, and get solutions for that. Or if you think it's more beneficial that you run all of your workflows on ServiceTitan, for example, also timesheets for your crew in the field, etc. ServiceTitan offers you all those modular solutions. And so with that, it has grown over the last 13, 14 years into a very, very substantial business. I think a business that its investors are proud of, and as they should be. And so now ServiceTitan was reported, we talked about it here, to go public relatively soon. It has now published its S1 filing, which is what Meritech has analyzed. And so as part of that analysis, a very interesting fact came out, and that is that in its last private financing round prior to the IPO 2 years ago, it gave the investors in that Series H round quite interesting terms that compound and that might have put ServiceTitan on the clock here to go public very, very quickly, or else the early investors and the founders might not see as much liquidity as they want. And that's what TechCrunch is reporting.
Yeah, so what it's saying is that they agreed to a deal in 2022 that set a deadline for it to go public in May 2024. So this is actually quite crazy, because how would they know in 2022 that the company will go public in 2024? Maybe it's more obvious than perhaps.
They actually did not know that. They basically just gave variable guarantee. Let me describe it in neutral terms, not jargon. They basically gave a preferred return to the latest investors. They said, hey, I'm not going to tell you when I go public, but I'm going to promise you that I out-earn your cost of capital above rate X. And if I go public later, I will go public for a higher valuation. If I go public earlier, I can already clear the preferred return threshold that I'm promising you for a lower valuation. But that means that the preferred return that I'm promising you, it compounds year over year. Albert Einstein, right? So the strongest force in the universe is compound interest. That's what's working against ServiceTitan here, because they gave this kind of preferred return promise through very technical and complicated mechanisms, in this case, a ratchet, to the latest investors. And that way, in the liquidity preference stack, which is jargon to say, hey, I have to pay back the invested capital plus the preferred return of my latest investors. And then I go back in the stack and I pay back all the previous investors' money with their preferred return, typically only 1x, so only the original capital, until I see as a founder my own money. That's what's working against them here, because that seems to be compounding, and that puts them on the clock to go quicker rather than later.
Question here. Do we know what was the promised yield to the investors?
So it says from the AS1 filing that they need a preferred return of 11% annually on the original valuation. So every year they need to clear an additional 11% back to the Series H founders.
So does it mean that because they are rushing, that means that they are not hitting this 11% hurdle rate?
That they are not confident that they will actually clear beyond 11% next year. That's what this signals.
And is it general? I think feels like speculation here, but feels like it's a very bad signal, really, because trying to imagine where the founders can be and the team can be is that they have to go public, or they have to get some additional funding. Otherwise, their shareholding is decreasing every single year.
It's like a Russian roulette almost.
I mean, you know that time is ending, and perhaps the business is not going great, and it's gonna stop at some point. Feels like.
So what this does, so Russian roulette so here you have to differentiate two perspectives with the metaphor, Owen. The perspective of the company and the perspective of a founder or an early investor that sits at the bottom of the liquidity preference stack. The company, for them, it's not Russian roulette. The company in itself there's a solid company as per the S1 filing. It will do a very good valuation. It will raise the capital that the company needs. The perspective of the founder or the early investor who sit at the bottom of the preference stack, that's a cash problem though. Because every year that I wait longer and that this preferred return rate compounds, the less likely I am to actually see cash on my original investment, because I have to pay back all the investors who invested after me, plus their hurdle rate. Now, normally that's not compounding problem, because very, very normally in venture land, the preferred return is 1x. So meaning every investor wants a promise that, hey, if you make an exit, pay me my original investment, but I'm not putting a hurdle rate on top of that. Here, that's what happened. The technical term for that, TechCrunch doesn't use it, but the technical term that you use in finance markets is an IRR to IPO deal. So you're basically asking the company to give you an IRR guarantee on liquidity, and only after that, everyone else gets cash. So that's the perspective of the founders or the early investors at the bottom of the stack here is, hey, this is problematic. And the longer, Martin, I think you're bang on. This is a signal that the shareholders and the company do not believe that they will clear 11% here over the next years.
So I think this is super interesting, actually, dynamics here, because first of all, what potential impact? I'm not. Maybe we don't have to discuss ServiceTitan, but on this. But maybe you can share some thoughts. What's the impact on the technology and the business itself if there is dynamics like that happening?
They're just like not,
because you might not be ready for this for the decision, but you have to take it. So is it not like playing against the business, perhaps to a degree?
Yeah, maybe a conflict of interest, right? Internally of what you're trying to build, because you're just trying to build to achieve a certain thing, as opposed to perhaps what's in the best interests of, say, the product or your employees or your office building, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I also heard somewhere that when obviously this is not a public business, right? But for the public businesses, like CEOs, I think they become fiduciaries of the business, which means that they have to do the best for their shareholders. Yeah.
So in most markets, that is the case.
In most markets, yeah. So obviously, this is not a public. It's not a public business, but there is my question in my head is like, will people in a similar situation do the best for the business, or will they do the best for themselves?
Okay, lot to unpack here. Let me perhaps reply to the first part of your question with a metaphor to bring it into the real life of everyone else. So guys, you're business owners, right? You own your own businesses. You have no external investors. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
In your traditional businesses.
Yeah, correct.
So if now there's let's use a debt as an example. If now a bank gave you money for 11% annual interest, and you have free cash flow in the business, would you pay the loan or would you keep the loan?
I kept the loan.
You would keep the loan. Okay, why?
Because it's I wouldn't do it at 11%, but I would have to see what's the interest and how much free cash flow I can generate, what I can do with this money.
Agreed.
Interesting, no? What about you?
I think the same. Yeah, I don't, because you don't. Like, from what I understand, the question is, I wouldn't need the money. So what would I do with it? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. You would keep the money, or you would even increase the loan if you think my business is going to generate me in excess of 11%
exactly
annual return. If I don't believe that, and yet I have free cash flow, I would retire the loan. That's just, that's what a savvy business owner is doing. Guys, that's what this signals. That's exactly what this signals. They want to retire the preferred return because they actually do not think that they can clear that hurdle rate in the next years. Now, nobody has perfect foresight, so they might still clear the 11%. I'm just saying what it signals in terms of what the shareholders today think. And secondly, there's a cash component here. So now let's adjust the metaphor, guys. So imagine your debt provider has told you, hey, you can generate free cash flow, but your free cash flow first has to go to my 11% year over year before you can pay yourself a salary. If I adjust the metaphor that way, does it change your judgment?
I mean, I start sweating when I hear stuff like that towards me. I just don't like to be restrained too much. So, does it change? I think if that's the case, you need to pay it back as ASAP.
Yeah,
really.
you're forced to spend it in this circumstance, right? From my understanding.
That's exactly what's happening here, right? It's because of the liquidity preference. That's the equivalent here. So basically, not only do you have to promise them 11% in the books, but actually when liquidity happens, they get served first. And the longer I let it compound, the more cash I have to serve them. And I have to get that cash first in the liquidity in order to get served myself. So that it might never reach me, even though we might have this big IPO. And that, unfortunately, guys, that is a very ugly truth of venture that a lot of first-time founders, they are not getting. They think they are so exceptionally smart by getting a lot of money across their venture lifetime. And in the end, they realize, holy crap, I would have made more money if I actually stayed with fewer venture money and I sold for 50 million. And then they give you these monikers of, you just have to be ambitious. You just have to be ambitious. They regret all of that bullshit at the end of a journey like this, when they actually raised 1.5 billion or 600 million or 300 million, the world is 100 million. The world is full of these examples and they cannot clear the exit cash. And then they get nothing. It happens all the time. To be clear, I don't think that's what's going to happen here because ServiceTitan is a generational company and it will have no trouble raising more and more capital in excess of the money that they owe the existing investors. But it is a cautious warning example of a lot of the graveyard of companies that we still have that still need to pay back their investors before the founders see anything from the last 10 years. And it's not being talked about because it is an unpopular subject. Second time and third time founders always get it, the mature founders.
venture money is a rocket fuel. Rocket fuel is expensive.
Yeah.
Put it in rockets.
That's actually stuck in my head since you said that a few weeks ago.
Yes.
Patrick.
Yeah, to be fair, that's not my quote. I was stealing it from someone else, but it's fitting.
Yeah, it works. Just looking at the bottom here, I never knew this about IPOs actually, but according to the paragraph right at the bottom here, it's a net loss of $183 million, 12-month period that ended on July 31st, 2024. Companies go public making a loss. Is that a common thing?
Sorry, come again?
That companies who are making a loss can file for public.
Oh, yeah. It depends on the exchange you're listing at a little bit. So in the US exchanges for tech IPOs, that's much more common than a profitable company. In Indian exchanges, up until recently, it was actually a requirement that you were profitable for a number of quarters before you could file. That has been weakened a little bit and softened up, but still you need to demonstrate a very substantial P&L balance sheet, a cash flow statement for them to let you, to allow you to list. So that's a bit stricter. In Europe, there's no technical requirement like that, but institutional investors will typically expect a very clear path to profitability and a believable path to profitability. So it sits a little bit in between. In the US, it's fairly common for tech IPOs to happen at no profitability.
Yeah, to me, it's still all remarkable.
Yeah, this is like it's going
founded in 2012.
Yeah.
So that's like 12 years running, 1.5 billion in venture, and net loss of 183.
Yeah.
How can this turn around?
Look, it's a software business. So once you fire all your software engineers, you will be profitable. So this is unless you have negative contribution margins, I should say. So unless your distribution is inefficient and you spend too much on sales and marketing, that actually the ARR that you acquire is negative. But if you have positive contribution margin, a company like this can always decide to become net profitable by firing all the product development team and just maintaining customer success and software support. I would expect that ServiceTitan actually could do exactly that. So in that way, it is sort of justified. The companies that should not be justified are the ones that have negative contribution margins, because that means actually that your distribution is not working out. And that for me are companies that at this stage, I would never invest in. I don't think that's ServiceTitan, by the way.
Okay. Contribution margin you mentioned. I think you mentioned it earlier as well. This is very important metrics, I think, feels like.
So I'm quoting Amar Hanspal when he was at Martindale's Next Dev conference this year. And I thought Amar nailed it. I always describe it with a metaphor, but let me give you Amar's. I'm not going to get it verbatim, but I think I'm giving it in spirit. And Amar was on with Bricks and Bytes as well. So Amar said, hey, the gross margin determines or demonstrates that I create value for my customers. The distribution margin demonstrates whether I can distribute it
efficiently,
profitably. That's exactly right. And the metaphor that I always use is founders are way too obsessed with the product and product market fit because too many generic VCs teach them that over the last 15 years. And they are way under obsessed with distribution market fit. The metaphor is the following. The product is the key to a lock, to exactly one lock, typically, in a door. Your distribution is whether you can manufacture the door with the same lock 1 million times. It has no value to me if my key fits into one door and I can only find that door once. That is complete waste of money. It only works if the key that I produce, I can actually find 1 million doors that it fits into. And that's distribution and that's contribution margin. And I keep saying, this is now my saying, inside every category creating B2B company is a fusion reactor called distribution. I look for distribution advantages. Product, in the end, is going to be commodity. There are technology companies that have truly differentiated tech, like Speckle, like Snaptrude. Most of the businesses on the construction tech side, the product is commodity. You can beat your own chest as much as you want. The product in the end, after 3, 4, or 5 years, should be nailed. After that, at the very, very latest, distribution should be all of your attention. And if you can't figure it out, you're going to be in trouble.
Especially in the times of the ChatGPT moment that everyone can
Exactly right.
get it done. Very good. I learned a lot on this one.
Should we go to the next one?
Yes. So here we have Alfonso Pecatiello said, I will probably not read it. Should I read it or not?
Give us a brief.
Maybe paraphrase.
Yeah.
Right. So Alfonso said that ECB's professional forecasters now expect 5-year GDP growth in Europe to come at only 1.3%. Previously, it used to be 2% in real terms before the financial crisis. So that's I don't know, 40% decrease from how it used to be, which probably is not good. And there's lots of reasons why I guess the Europe is slowing down with the productivity. But just wanted to get your thoughts both on like why is it happening, perhaps, and is construction in any way a contributor to it, and it can it help in any way?
Patrick,
Owen, what do you think?
You go.
I mean, he says Europe, not EU, so you can have an opinion.
Are we included in that? I honestly don't study this stuff enough. But what I will say is, based on my consumption of content across social media, I will see that this message about Europe dying is a recurring theme. And a lot of people are getting quite upset about it. I've also seen some stuff about how the US is taking all of our talent here, which I'm sure we discussed a while ago, Patrick, with you. So I don't know if enough people are saying it. Is it true? I don't know, or is it just trendy to discuss at this point in time?
I think I just add to it that usually these projections by experts they are overshoot. So if we're projecting 1.3, it might be less than that even. Let's ask someone who sits in the center of Europe right now.
Yeah, strongest economy.
And by the way, I mean its demise is greatly exaggerated. But Germans themselves also contribute to that a lot because they're eternally pessimist and make sure that people also know that they are pessimists. My take on this is, I think in general, there's not much to debate here. I think in general, the point that Alfonso is making it's probably right, and it's not good. So it's hard to take the GDP growth projection of the European Central Bank as something positive. Like, you would have to smoke some really hard shit to think that that is a positive thing. But I do like to contextualize and nuance things. As you look further into the future, a lot of assumptions are baked into people's predictions, and very rarely do all of these assumptions actually materialize. And that's why if I look further into the future, which I don't like to do as a venture capitalist, which is counterintuitive to many people, my job is observing the present, but not predicting the future. I tend to become very cautious, especially if I don't know the assumptions. And even if I do know them, the more assumptions I stack, the harder it becomes to actually be correct with the forecast. So that's one. Two, in terms of contextualizing this, Europe could relatively easily spike its growth rate by just ramping up deficit spending. It wouldn't be efficient spending. That's the problem. I'll come to that in my third point. But it could spike the growth rate. Now, would that make people feel better? You're shaking your head, Martin. You don't think so?
I mean, because more deficit is more inflation, really. So what kind of growth is it if it's 10%, if inflation is 17?
There's actually a population group for whom that will be exceptionally good.
I know, asset owners. Yeah,
exactly.
I agree. But
exactly. You studied your financial markets. That's exactly right. And so the asset owners always will benefit from inflation. The ones that consume, that use spending to consume but not own assets, are the ones that get hit hardest. by inflation. So we could all make ourselves feel really, really good if we amped up our government spending to US levels, China levels, Japan levels even. I mean, Japan's government debt is crazy compared to Germany's. I think it's 4.5 times that of Germany. Germany is at 60% debt to GDP. Japan should be, if I'm still correct with the number, it might be a few months old, at about 250% or more, right? So massive, massive difference. The Germans are, as the biggest European economy and the fourth largest global economy, are, by the way, fun fact, sorry, I just want to quickly contextualize this. I only learned this year, and I think it's a fascinating stat. Can you tell me one US state that is a larger economy than Germany?
California?
Texas.
None of both.
None?
Actually, none of the US states are larger economy than Germany. So US as a federation system, of course, is much larger, is about as large as the European economy. But actually, Germany is bigger than any US state in terms of economy.
Wow.
So just to give people also context on, hey, what do we attach to growth rate compared to what it is today, right? So, but now back to my point. So we could all make ourselves feel really, really good if we just amped up government spending, and Germany is too conservative about it. 60% right now is probably, if you compare globally, you can make a case for actually you need to double that. And then there's defense spending, etc. The third point, before I come to my last point, it matters in economy, and it's not being discussed enough, where your capital is spent. So if you actually keep the capital, in the end, it's relatively easy. What is the net inflows to my economy minus the net outflows of my economy? And if that number is positive, you're going to have a very, very strong economy. Norway and Switzerland are prime examples of that because they have a lot of capital inflow, and those out-earn the capital outflows of the economy. So if, for example, the European economy were to increase the spending on defense, and it would spend it on European companies, that would be absolutely productive. That would be very, very good. Now, it's very bad if you spend it on Korean, Japanese, or US defense. Bad in terms of the outflows and inflows. Of course, we need the defense direly, so let's do it. I'm just saying, if you could spend it on your own manufacturing base and your own companies, and the cash flows would stay within the economy, you're actually on path to making yourself more sustainable. So that's an important third point here. And then finally, I think the true thing, though, if the European economy amped up spending, it would be very capital inefficient, because the underlying root cause is unfortunately too high bureaucracy. And that would lead to is already leading to very inefficient spending. So to Alfonso's point back here, in my opinion, it's not about the growth rate. The growth rate in the end is a derivative of two other things, and that is too high bureaucracy that hinders innovation, that hinders adoption, and too low capital or government spending.
Thanks for this little lecture, but no, it was very good. It was very good. But does it make so within our field, construction technology? Does it feel the same? This productivity chart, does it feel the same way, or is it not going to be that?
Not at all, actually. So construction tech in Europe is anecdotally the exact diametrical chart. So actually the adoption, the growth is much, much faster than that of other tech sectors. It has transformed completely over the last 2.5 to 3 years. France is an amazing market that way, even if the French are still they are also very proud of their nation, but tendentially also a bit more, pessimist, not necessarily the most optimistic about their own forecast, unrightly so, because actually the French construction markets in terms of construction tech adoption have been very good. And Germany also picking up quite quickly. It's nowhere been talked about, but I see it anecdotally every day. And so I think for the construction tech companies in Europe, it's actually a thriving economy.
So that's a good news, because even though it's all goes to shit as it looks, in construction tech, we are not that bad.
They're still going up.
Yeah, I wouldn't write Europe off just yet. I mean, there are some fundamental underlying reasons why or why not this will happen over the next 10 years. And I think they all have to do with the bureaucrats.
Let's fire all of them.
Do it. Okay, guys. Thank you so much. We will see you again next week.
Yes, thank you
Thanks,
very much.
guys.